All right, here's a start of a tutorial for using our fiber laser. The first thing, of course, much like on the regular CO2 lasers, you're going to go into Lightburn and we'll have to import a file. In this case, I've got this little fixture I've created. We will open it up and there you go. And if you notice here, if we go to the cuts and layers, it looks just like the system we're used to. If I double click now though, you'll see that we have more things here. So we've got a speed, a frequency, a pulse width, passes and things like that. The one thing I found is global passes, number of passes, these will multiply. And so if you have 10 here and 10 here, it would be like 100 passes. So keep in mind, so I'm not sure why we need both of them, but there you go. Now, what settings do you use for these things? Okay, well, that's where we go. And let's just, because these numbers here are not correct, we're going to go to the material library. Now, if you don't see the material library as one of these tabs down here, you can go to Window and you'll notice that it's right there, Material Library. You can bring it up and add it to your thing. So the Material Library, now for instance, in this case I brought some thin brass, and so basically we're going to go look here and oh look, there you go, we've got brass. Okay, and in this case the brass we're using, it's actually thinner than this, but that's the closest one we have, so we will select this right here. And what you need to do now is you need to assign this material, and it should show up in the cuts and layers with the new value, and it did. Okay, but keep in mind you have to select these every time to do this. Okay, so make sure you've selected, and because I went and looked at the variables that were set for this, it was already selected. Now I'm going to do the next one. I have to go through the same little thing, go to the material library. I'm going to select this again, make sure it's selected. I will assign it. And if we go to cuts and layers, now we have the good starting values for you to start working with your material. All right, another thing you need to be aware of is for the three different kinds of lenses that we have, three sizes of lenses, each should have a specific setup installed before you run your project, okay, or at least make sure that you have the proper one. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to click on this little wrench icon at the top, and you'll notice you get this device settings for the laser. Now notice here we have this load core file. And if you're just checking, I'll notice here that, oh, I'm using the 110 lens, which is actually 112. But so I would be fine if I'm set for using the 110 setup. If not, let's say we go to here, core, I will see that I've got this OV laser folder that should come up. And notice here we've got the 70, the 10, and the 300. So for instance, if I double click on this one and I go down here, you'll see this 75 by 5 core. Okay, so what I would do is I would open that file up, double check, and there it is. Now in the case of our example today, we're going to do the 110. So I'm going to back up a little bit, go back to the 110, core 110, pick the core 110 file, and that's what we have to use today. So just make sure that that's set up. And you know, if you're using a 70 and then some done and you're really nice and you put the 110 back in, that's because it's the more general one, it would be nice if you also reset this file before you left. But always, I highly recommend checking to make sure you've got the right core file loaded for the lens you are using.
All right, so now we're getting ready to cut. In this particular one, we are actually going to cut the brass. So like the CO2 laser, when you're cutting through a piece of material, you certainly don't want to be cutting into this bottom board here. So whenever you're going to cut through the material, make sure that you raise it up off the board. And in this particular case, we have this little jig here, which allows us to take a piece of material and stick it in here. But one of the things that we have to understand is that once we have moved this material away from the board, then these settings on the side here, which are the optimum focal distance, no longer apply, because that focal distance was meant to be against the bottom board here. And we allow this, and we use this focus stick, to set the distance exactly to your material. So you just move it down like that. Just make sure that it kind of slides in, a lot like the CO2 laser. And that means that you have the absolute best focal distance. And the reason that you want that focal distance is because the library that we provide for you, all of the settings for the materials, for engraving and cutting, have assumed that your laser is at the optimum focal distance. Without that, none of these settings that we give you are really going to apply, and the cutting's not going to work properly. So make sure you use these focal sticks whenever you're going to be doing cutting or engraving. This is the best way to do it.
Okay, now we're ready to start doing the actual cut. So we've got all our material library settings in there. We've got our core file in there and changed our things. And so now what we're going to do is you go here and say Start. Click that, and now you see, so bounds is the frame. So of course the first thing you want to do is do a bounds check to make sure that, again, it's not off the material, things like that. The other thing too, when you're cutting these materials, especially in the jig we have here, is make sure it's flat as possible. It's very sensitive if there's a little bit of a kink or something or curvature to your material in the vise, that it is as flat as possible. So take a look at it, make sure you're flat. Alrighty, well, we know we're in bounds, so what we're going to do now is we'll hit Start. Now, this will take a little bit of time. What you'll see here is, well, let's start it. So I'm going to start it. You hear a hissing noise. You may not hear it on the microphone right now. But you'll notice here, you've got some sort of indication here that it's busy. Unfortunately, it doesn't really tell you, out of the 100% how far it's going along, but you'll notice that it's busy. Of course, you'll hear it when it stops, but you'll also notice here that this will stop as well, and then you're ready to look at your material. Now, we've cut a number of different materials here. We did a thinner brass the other day. We've got a little thicker brass today. I believe it's 0.016 inches. The thicker stuff will get hot. Okay, so when you go to remove your material after it's been cut, be careful. Okay, it could be hot. Yeah, so you see, now you can see the framing rectangle, so you know that your material and the cut is within your material. So we're ready to hit play or start. There we go, now it's cutting. And now you can hear it makes this sort of hissing sound. That's good, and you want to hear that. If you don't hear the hissing sound, then your material is not in focus. And right now it's cutting out the middle part of my design. And now the outer part of the design. And once again, as you notice, it's taking a bit of time cutting through this material. So, as we mentioned, if you didn't, be careful when you go to remove your material from the cutter, as it may be hot. And in this case, this brass, I looked at it, was 0.016 inches thick, and the cut goes pretty quick, actually. I think we're within probably about a minute or so is the cut time. And if you notice here, you'll hear that it's not hissing at certain spots. That's because it's already cut through. And now it's done. Okay, so if you need to change the lens, let's say normally most projects are going to use the 112 millimeter lens, but let's say you want to use the 70 millimeter lens, which you might want to do because it's closer and you may get improved accuracy with your etchings and cuttings. So that would be why you might use that particular lens. Now, there's a couple of things with this. We talked about selecting going to the material library, selecting the proper material setting for your cut. Now, if you change the lens to the 70 millimeter lens, or for that matter to the 300 millimeter lens, you have to load in a new material library. Okay, and so here's the material library. Okay, and so what we're going to need to do here is we have to load a library. Okay, so what we'll go now is we're going to sit here and say, okay, I need to load a new file. So here with the library, we'll say load. And in this case, it comes up. You'll see this is MOM's Lightburn MOPA libraries, MOPA 60 watt V3, da da da. And in here are these different CLB files. Okay, so these are the material libraries. And we'll go to the 70 millimeter one. We have to pick the new file, okay, for your material. Okay, and then you want to make sure that you're going to go to cuts and layers, and you're going to want to make sure you reassign these values. Okay, so now I go to the material library, and again we were doing brass, and we're going to do my 0.5 millimeter, and we'll assign it. And we look at cuts layers. Cuts layers again. Okay, notice that it changed them. And now we have 19 and 63 instead of 18 and 95, which is the values we had used for the 110 millimeter lens. Okay, so yes, so very important. Another thing to remember, and another thing nice to reload at the end of your session if you're going to change it to the 70. And if you are going to use the 70 millimeter lens, please put it back to the all 110 settings, because that's what most people will be using.
So just to remember, when you change lenses, it's a core file has to be replaced and your material library has to be replaced. So you actually have two different files you're going to have to load for the changing of the lens.
Correct.